In the middle of the 19th century, Japan faced a question that could no longer be avoided. Could it remain a closed, feudal society while Western powers were forcing their way across Asia? For more than 2 centuries, the Tokugawa shogunate had kept order through a rigid political system. The emperor existed, but practical power rested with the shogun. Regional lords controlled domains, samurai served within a hereditary warrior class, and foreign contact was tightly limited under the policy often called sakoku. This system had created stability, but stability was not the same as strength. By the 1850s, steamships, industrial weapons, and imperial competition were changing the balance of power. Japan's leaders could see what had happened elsewhere. Countries that could not resist Western pressure were forced into unequal treaties, economic dependence, or colonization. The Meiji Restoration began because Japan's old order could no longer answer the crisis of survival. The immediate shock came from outside. In 1853, Commodore Matthew Perry arrived with American warships under orders from President Millard Fillmore. The message was simple: Japan had to open ports and engage with the West. The shogunate did not have a convincing military answer. Its authority depended on looking capable of protecting the realm, but Perry's ships revealed a dangerous gap between Japan's traditional defenses and modern industrial power. Treaties followed, and many Japanese viewed them as humiliating because they were not negotiated between equal powers. They limited Japan's control over trade and sovereignty, and they made the shogun look weak. This foreign pressure did more than open ports. It exposed a legitimacy crisis. If the shogunate could not defend Japan from outside powers, then why should it continue to rule in the emperor's name? That question turned a diplomatic crisis into a political revolution. Inside Japan, the crisis split the samurai class. Samurai were supposed to be loyal to the established order, but the established order itself became confusing. The shogun governed the country, yet the emperor was the symbolic source of political legitimacy. When imperial voices criticized the shogunate's handling of foreign demands, many samurai felt pulled between loyalty to the shogun and loyalty to the emperor. Some became known as shurshur, or men of spirit, who rallied around the slogan of revering the emperor and expelling the barbarians. At first, this did not mean a clear plan for modernizing Japan. Many wanted to restore national dignity by resisting foreigners. But their anger created a powerful political movement. Lower and middle-ranking samurai, especially in ambitious domains, began to see the Tokugawa system as an obstacle. The restoration was not simply emperor versus shogun. It was a struggle inside Japan's ruling class over who could save the country. The most important opposition came from powerful domains on the margins of Tokugawa authority, especially Satsuma and Choshu. These domains had resources, military traditions, and leaders willing to challenge the center. At first, anti-shogun forces were divided and suffered setbacks. They disagreed over strategy, ideology, and timing. But foreign pressure and shogunal weakness created incentives for cooperation. Satsuma and Choshu eventually formed an alliance, and that alliance changed everything. They were not merely nostalgic defenders of an ancient imperial order. They were practical political actors who understood that Japan needed a new central authority capable of reform. By rallying around the emperor, they gained a powerful symbol that could unite opposition to the shogunate. The emperor gave the movement legitimacy, the domains gave it military force. Together, symbolism and force made restoration possible. On January 3, 1868, Emperor Meiji declared that political power had been restored to the imperial house. This moment is often remembered as the Meiji Restoration, but the word restoration can be misleading. It suggests a simple return to older rule, when in reality Japan was about to create something new. The emperor became the central symbol of government, but the new leaders around him were not trying to recreate ancient court politics. They wanted a unified state that could mobilize resources, command loyalty, reform institutions, and negotiate with foreign powers from a position of strength. The Charter Oath, issued soon after, expressed broad goals: deliberative government, social mobility, public unity, and knowledge seeking from around the world. In other words, the Restoration used the language of tradition to launch a radical project of modernization. The old regime did not disappear quietly. Supporters of the Tokugawa resisted, leading to the Boshin War. This conflict was not just a final samurai feud, it was the military test of whether the new imperial government could actually rule. Forces loyal to the former shogunate fought to preserve their position, and resistance even continued in the north, where the short-lived Republic of Ezo appeared in Hokkaido. But the imperial side prevailed. By the 1870s, the emperor's authority was practically unquestioned, at least as the official center of the state. The victory mattered because reform requires power. Without defeating Tokugawa resistance, the new government would have remained one faction among many. By winning the war, the Meiji leaders gained the space to dismantle the old order and rebuild Japan from the top down. One of the deepest changes was the abolition of the domain system. Under Tokugawa rule, Japan was divided into semi-autonomous domains ruled by daimyo. This structure made sense in a feudal order, but it limited the creation of a modern centralized state. The Meiji government needed national taxes, national laws, national military organization, and national administration. Gradually, domain authority was replaced by prefectures controlled by the central government. This was revolutionary because it shifted loyalty and revenue away from regional rulers and toward the national state. The government also changed currency and administrative systems, making Japan easier to govern as one unified country rather than a patchwork of feudal territories. These reforms were bureaucratic, but they were not minor. They created the machinery that allowed Japan to industrialize, educate, tax, conscript, and compete internationally. The samurai class paid a heavy price for this transformation. For centuries, samurai had occupied a privileged hereditary position. They received stipends, held status, and represented the warrior elite of the old order. But a modern state did not need a hereditary warrior class in the same way. It needed a national army, trained and supplied by the central government. The abolition of samurai privileges, stipends, and exclusive military identity attacked the social foundation of feudal Japan. Some former samurai adapted, becoming officials, officers, teachers, entrepreneurs, or political activists. Others felt betrayed. They had helped overthrow the shogunate in the name of imperial restoration, only to see the new state dismantle the class system that had defined their lives. This contradiction made modernization socially explosive. The Restoration promised national strength, but it also destroyed many of the people who had made it possible. Industrialization became the practical engine of Meiji transformation. Japan's leaders studied Western production methods, military organization, technology, education, and legal systems. They did not copy blindly. Their goal was selective adoption: take what strengthened the state, preserve what supported national unity, and avoid becoming subordinate to foreign powers. Railways, factories, modern weapons, telegraphs, schools, and new administrative structures all served a larger strategic purpose. Japan wanted to revise unequal treaties, resist imperial domination, and become recognized as a modern power. The government encouraged new industries, imported expertise, sent students abroad, and restructured institutions to support rapid development. This speed was extraordinary because Japan was not merely adding technology to an unchanged society. It was changing the relationship between state, class, economy, and military power at the same time. Modernization also produced backlash. The Saga Rebellion and the Satsuma Rebellion showed that not everyone accepted the new order. The Satsuma Rebellion was especially symbolic because Satsuma had been one of the domains that helped bring down the shogunate. Former samurai who felt dispossessed resisted the central government they had helped create. Their defeat marked the end of any realistic attempt to restore the old warrior order. This was one of the most dramatic lessons of the Meiji period. Revolution often consumes its original supporters when the goals of the new state move beyond the expectations of the people who fought for change. The government survived because it had built stronger centralized institutions and a modernizing military. After these rebellions, Japan's path away from feudalism became nearly irreversible. The Meiji Restoration eventually produced a constitutional state, though not a liberal democracy in the modern sense. The Meiji Constitution of 1889 created formal institutions for the Empire of Japan and remained in place until after World War II. It combined modern state structures with imperial sovereignty. The emperor stood at the center of legitimacy, while political elites, bureaucrats, military leaders, and institutions operated within that framework. This balance reflected the Restoration's core logic: Japan would modernize without abandoning the imperial symbol that unified the country. The constitution gave Japan a recognizable modern political form, which helped it engage with the international order. But it also embedded tensions between representation, bureaucracy, military authority, and imperial ideology. Those tensions would shape Japan's future far beyond the 19th century. The long-term consequences reached far outside Japan. By modernizing rapidly, Japan avoided the fate of many societies pressured by Western imperialism. But it also became an imperial power itself. The institutions created after the Restoration helped Japan pursue colonial interests against its neighbors and reshape the balance of power in East Asia. This makes the Meiji Restoration difficult to reduce to a simple success story. It ended feudalism, centralized government, accelerated industry, and strengthened national sovereignty. It also laid foundations for empire, militarization, and regional conflict. Its importance lies in that complexity. The Restoration was both a response to vulnerability and the beginning of a new kind of power. Japan reinvented itself because it feared domination, and in doing so, it became one of the most consequential states in modern Asian history. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.